Hello students, welcome to object-oriented programming using Java class. Before this we have covered programming class. So in programming class we covered basic constructs like what do you mean by the variables, data types, structures, pointers, functions, arrays. But in this course we will do much more things like we will go in advance and we will see the concept of classes and objects. So if you think of Java, Java is the first language which is a purely object-oriented language. Before this we learned C. C is the structured language and C++ is the hybrid language, which means the combination of structured as well as object-oriented language. But Java is the first language which is purely the object-oriented programming language. So before object-oriented programming, we have the procedural languages. So first of all, we should understand what is the difference between the procedural languages and object-oriented languages. So if you see in procedural languages, we have a lot of procedures like this. So if you see this slide, so we have two functions and each function is interacting with some variables, performing some operation and performing some task. So right now we have two functions, but in procedural languages the issue is when you add more and more procedures, so your code become the messy code like this. So if you see, all the procedures are interdependent to each other, and if you make one change in any function, so it may affect the rest of the functions. So this is the issue with the procedural languages. So your code become too much messy and it is disorganized. So to solve this, now we have better language to organize, which is called the object-oriented programming languages. So in object-oriented programming language, so we mix the related functions into one unit. So for example, if you see this, this is one unit which is a yellow unit, and this is another unit which is a red unit. So in yellow unit, you can see this unit contains some function and some variables, and these functions and variables are related to this particular unit. And in this, the functions and variables are related to this unit. So this unit is called the object. The object contains the properties as well as methods. So in object orientation, the basic unit is the class and their objects. So let's see what is class and what is object. So class is a logical thing. So if you recall, in the C language we learned how to create the primitive data types like int, float, double, short, strings, characters. So if you want to create your own data type, so you have to interact with the classes. So classes are used to create the user-defined data types. Similarly, we can also call a class as a logical unit. So what do you mean by the logical unit? Which does not have any physical appearance. For example, if I say the student, so student is a general term. So we have not maybe seen the student. So for example, me, I'm the student, but I'm not the class. I am the representation of the student class. So I am object or the representation of the student class. So student is something which is logical in nature. The object is something which is physical in nature. So objects are the representation or the instances of those classes. Okay. So to recap, so what is class? Class is a template, or class is a logical thing. And what is object? Object is the instance of that class, or object is the representation of that class. So if we talk about the object, for example, look at this the example. If we have a car, so car has some properties and some methods or operations. For example, car has some properties like make, model, color, and it has some methods like start, stop and move. So every class or object has certain methods and properties. So what is object-oriented now programming language? So in object-oriented programming language, as I discussed, we can create the objects and classes, and besides this, the object-oriented programming language should follow some principles, and these principles are like encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance and polymorphism. So each object-oriented programming language must have these four pillars: encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance and polymorphism. So in our next lecture, we will try to learn about these four pillars of object-oriented programming language. So before I end this lecture, so just to recap, in this lecture we learned why we prefer the object-oriented programming language over the procedural languages, and what is object-oriented programming language, what is the object in class, and what are the basic four pillars of object-oriented programming language. In next lecture, we learn what are these four pillars. Thank you so much. See you in next lecture.